Tonight, I'm Kim Wheeler. I work for Channel 3. I'm the education reporter and also the weekend morning anchor. I feel like I should mention at the top of this program, of course, what happened in Boston today. I'm sure that's all on our minds tonight. So thank you for coming in spite of all that's going on right now in our country. So thank you. This is, of course, a very important topic, too, as we just saw with that performance, which was really wonderful, I think very eye-opening. There were some things in there that I certainly hadn't thought about before. So I'm sure all of you probably took some things away from that performance as well. First of all, I'd like to introduce our panel. I have Jeff Capretta next to me. He's with West Shore Enforcement Bureau. Also, Don Davies is here from New Directions, and Sharice Jones from Recovery Resources, and Aaron Marks, who is going to talk about his journey through recovery tonight with us. But first of all, if we could just maybe all start with what you would really like people here tonight to take away with them, and you know, from your perspective, what is most important that we address tonight?
Pass the message is the most important thing. Each and every one of you go home and speak to your loved ones, family, friends, grandparents, and spread the word. In 41 years of law enforcement, I've never seen it this bad with prescription medications and the use of heroin. It is an epidemic, and it's very frightening to me. I've got a lot of experience, but I've never seen it like this in my entire career. And I urge you to go home and talk about this with your family and friends, neighbors. If you're talking over the fence on a Saturday afternoon, share this with your neighbors. It's a very, very important topic.
All right, thank you. And Aaron, we talked a little bit before this program started. You have been recovering now for 8.5 years. And I know that you have a very personal message that you want to share with people because you've been down this path.
Right. I think it's important to know that, like, for me, I grew up in a nice community, great parents, you know, support, love. There was nothing wrong. And, you know, it still happened to me. I remember while it was happening, I kept thinking that it was normal and it was okay, all the way up until like the very end, which we'll talk about more. But so I think it's very important that people understand that there is no stereotype. There is no, you know, it can't happen in my house. It happens to this type of person. I mean, it can really happen to anyone.
Yeah. And Don, you're with New Directions, and you were saying to me that it used to be you would see clients coming in who are maybe 17, 18 years old. Now they're much younger.
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing children now that are coming in at 12 years old, addicted to heroin. And we had an individual that he was 16 years old, and he had 5 of his friends were dead from overdoses. And we've also had a 14-year-old girl who tells us that for every one supplier of marijuana or pot, she knows 5 for heroin. And so her parents moved her out of the city as a youth, hoping to avoid the heroin addiction. And adolescents in the suburbs are really the fastest growing population for this increase in use.
And the reason I think everybody is here tonight, obviously, is to learn more about this and talk to their kids about it. I'm the mom of a teenager, and just having a child in high school is a new experience, but then, you know, you talk about these issues, and obviously it can touch every one of our families in some way. And Sharice, I know that you really want to talk about what the best way for parents to address this is and how easy this access is, and you have a demonstration of that too.
I do. You know, children watch what we do, even more than what we say. Prescription drug abuse is on the rise amongst our teenagers, and part of the reason is the behaviors that we model every day. When I was growing up, my mother used to carry a really big purse everywhere she went. Now I'm an adult, and I am carrying her big purse everywhere I go. And you know, I thought about when I was preparing for the panel, it would be so cool if I could come in with a medicine cabinet so I could just show you that prescription drug abuse doesn't just look like someone taking an overdose of of an opiate that mimics the effects of heroin. And I said, you know what, I don't need to bring in a medicine cabinet because I have my purse. And You know? And the question that I have for you is, what's in your purse? When I was growing up, my parents modeled behaviors for me that set the stage for the type of woman that I was going to become. They, you know, they didn't smoke, but their parents did. And they grew up watching them smoke, and they didn't want to model that for me and my sister. They drink now, a little wine after dinner. I see wine in the refrigerator, and sometimes they cook with it, but not when I was growing up, because they wanted us to know that there are other ways for us to have fun. There are other ways for us to enjoy ourselves. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but you have to be mindful that every single thing that you do, you're being watched. There's always someone around you who's watching. In my medicine cabinet, I have a prescription for loratadine. It's a allergy medication. This prescription expired in 2006. I haven't looked at it in probably that many years, but it's still around. Prescription drug abuse is using a prescribed medication for a purpose for which it was not intended, in a dosage that it was not prescribed, or if you were not the recipient of the prescription, utilizing that medication. You know, I bet when I got this prescription that if one of my friends told me that they were suffering from hay fever, I would not have had a problem giving them one of my pills, because it's just an allergy medication. But our kids see that behavior. They see us sharing medications with each other that our doctors prescribe for us. And so when someone comes up to them and says, I have this thing and maybe you want to try it, it's not such a difficult thing for them to make that leap. It's a prescription medication. My mom shared her Vicodin with her best friend. It's probably not that dangerous. And so the message that I would say to the parents is be very, very careful about the permissiveness that you are giving, the behaviors that are going to set your children up to be able to more easily accept the prescription drug abuse behaviors that lead to the types of things you saw in the play here today.
And a lot of times there are those messages that we send them that we don't even realize we're doing. The one thing that really struck me in that performance was I hadn't even thought about open houses. How typical is that? And I'm sure, Jeff, you've probably heard those stories, that kids have access to these by just going to open houses.
Yes, not only open houses, but interestingly enough, last Thursday, our West Shore Young Leaders met, and that was a group of middle and high school students, and myself and Noreen Kyle, the school prevention specialist for Webb, we asked the group, what's the easiest way you can get medications? And several of them said, I go to my buddy's parents' house and just go through the medicine cabinet. Not even an open house scenario, but just them visiting at your house, spending some time at your house, they go to the medicine cabinet and see what you have. Very, very accessible, and that was the response they provided. I personally have seen cases where houses were vandalized or thefts occurred in the house for the prescription medications, and the individuals made out police reports on it, but it is commonplace, yes.
And I know you also want to mention tonight that there is a way you can get rid of these medications, especially if they're expired. There are ways of doing that in our communities that you want parents to know about.
Yes, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, has a biannual event. The next one is Saturday, April 27th. I think all of you received a flyer. And yes, I do want to promote this. It's Saturday, April 27th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. In addition, thanks to you people who are residents of the West Shore, the 6 western suburbs are Lakewood, Rocky River, Bay Village, Westlake, North Olmsted, and Fairview Park. And thanks to you, we have collection boxes at each of those 6 locations. 24/7 collection boxes, no questions asked. You walk in prescription medications, drop them in the box as you would drop mail in a box, and we will collect them. I'm proud to say, and thanks to you, nothing to do with Jeff Capretto, but thanks to you, in our evidence vault right now, since September, the last DEA event, the one-day event, we've collected 489 pounds of prescription medications. That's pills taken off the street. Those are pills separated out of the vials and placed in a box. 489 pounds, and I want to thank each and every one of you in the audience who's participate in that, because that's going to make the difference. Those pills are off the streets and not in the wrong hands. And I thank you for that.
And Aaron, you're here to share your personal story. How did it start for you? You said that it's been 8.5 years since you've been clean. How did the heroin abuse start?
Actually, a lot like the kid was talking about in the play. I mean, I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and somebody older offered me a joint, and we did it, and that continued on for a little while, and it was just very slow, and prescription drugs were actually what really pushed it forward. Was, I had heard that if you take a Xanax with this, you get this effect, and so we started doing that, and it slowly kept building and building and building, and there was alcohol involved, and by the time I got to college, I was actually addicted to opiate drugs, and the whole time I never realized I would have never associated myself as like a drug addict. I just thought that I was taking prescription pills, like nonchalantly, like, oh, these make me feel good, why don't I take them? And when I ran out, and I was going through physical withdrawals, essentially a kid who was, exactly like me, but acting like a predator because he needed to feed his addiction, gave me heroin and just told me that it would make me feel better, and it's essential. Then he started kind of drawing the link, but in a nonchalant way, like, oh, you're already doing this, it's really not that much different. You could just take this here, and gave it to me for free. And that's how it started.
And then how did you end up getting sober? How did you end up getting help?
There were 3 of us who were from, just the Cleveland suburbs, different schools, but we were all friends, and we all started at the same time. And I actually got a phone call from one of my friends that one of them had died from a drug overdose, and the other one had checked himself into rehab. Coincidence or not coincidence, at the same time. And I found out both in the same conversation, and I kept going for a while, for 4 more months actually. And I started talking to the kid who got sober. He kept calling me, and he would suggest that I check myself into a hospital or rehab or things like that. And at first I didn't listen, but at least I kept an open mind, and I watched him get better. He came in, even came and visited me, like, even though I was a mess, and I saw him getting better. And one night, it just clicked, and I picked up the phone and called my mom, and luckily, I checked myself into treatment.
Was your family aware that this was going on from a young age and then eventually went to heroin?
No, not to the extent. I mean, that's why I started with what I said. It's just like, my parents thought I was totally normal. I mean,
right.
It was like, oh, if I was drinking on the weekends with my friends, and I got, they found out I was drinking, they'd be like, well, he's young. And I even got punished for getting caught with pot a couple times, or, you know what I mean? But it was like, I always appeared to be okay. And there's denial there always, so even when I probably was worse, at points they still were, there was probably a little denial there, but no, I mean, I still kept a lot of my normal friends, and then, by the time it got really bad, they started to kind of have ideas, but at that point I was already doing heroin. I mean, it wasn't like, it had kind of built up to a really, really bad place.
And you weren't particularly unhappy or anything like that triggered any of this? It was just the access and peer pressure?
I think about that a lot. It's like, there were no things in my life that I should have been unhappy about. It's
right.
Not like I, had a troublesome, upbringing, or there was drama in the house, or, it wasn't anything like that. I think it was, realistically, and this is why I think it's important to understand the nature of why we're here talking in the suburbs, is that I felt like life wasn't real. Mm-hmm. It just felt like kind of stale and boring, and And, you know, you see things, you know, happening outside, and then you kind of compare it to your life, and it just feels like something's missing. So I think there was an excitement there at first, and it, you know, eventually it takes you over. It becomes less about that and more about an actual addiction.
Right, right. And Dawn, I would guess this is a very common story, isn't it?
It really is. We had an adolescent who was taking cocaine, using cocaine pretty regularly, and would usually be pretty unsettled when they weren't taking it and just never getting comfortable. And a friend of theirs said, "Why don't you just try some of this?" So on Friday night he tried some of it and felt, you know, better. And Saturday he tried some of it, and Sunday he said, "I'll never live without it." It was heroin. That's what he was given to get calm, and you know, we call it self-medication, any drug, but this is just another level of trying to find peace, trying to find calm, trying to get it all together while we're really getting ourselves in more trouble than we even understand, you know.
And it does oftentimes start with something like marijuana and then go to prescription, and then it keeps escalating.
You know, that's really a good point, Kim. Traditionally, it's been marijuana or beer, because beer was available in the house, or whiskey. Marijuana you get and not get caught with it, you throw it in your pocket, run. But now, even at New Directions, 22% of our kids that are coming in today are using prescription opiates first. And that's like a shock. But what's easier than to go to a medicine cabinet and get some drugs out of it, or go to a friend's house and get drugs out of it, or go to grandma's house and get drugs out of it. We had a child who was cutting grass for a woman down the street from where he lived. And she just trusted the heck out of him and loved him and said, you know, if you need iced tea, go in and get it. I'll be working in the garden, blah, blah, blah. And she came in and found him in her medicine cabinet. And he was in there looking for drugs, and that's how he got referred at that point. But she was like just totally blown out of the water, you know. And, you know, the message we're trying to give every parent and every person in this community is if you have drugs, prescription drugs, they need to be locked. They need to be locked up. And Sharice was saying after a certain date they need to be disposed of, and Jeff's told you how we can do that. But it's such a high risk to have these things available. And the kids, they talk in school, everyone's saying check your medicine cabinet. It's not, you know, it doesn't take a real smart person to figure out how to do it, you know.
Right, right.
You're very vulnerable.
And Sharice, there are some signs really that parents should look for. Although it is difficult, having a teenager, they're moody. And so it's, you know, often, you know, you're told to look for behavior changes, and those can change from day to day. So it's really hard sometimes to know, but are there some signs that really you should be looking for?
Well, Kim, really the thing that you are looking for are the behavior changes. I mean, I know that teenagers are moody, but, you know, my mom always used to tell me, I could tell when I'm listening to you who you're talking to, because you have a different voice with each person that you speak to. And so you know your child. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's anything that seems different, and whether it, sometimes maybe they're less responsive than they were before, but maybe they're overly attentive. You know, you don't want to just look on the one side, you want to look on both sides. And you really just want to look for anything that seems out of the ordinary. I mean, in this situation, you really want to err on the side of caution. And talk. You know, one reason that it's difficult for people, for parents sometimes, to know whether or not it's just their child being moody or whether their child is experiencing something different is because we don't talk to our children. You know, take the time to get to know them so that when there is a change, you actually can observe it and you can do something about it.
And this is something I know I've talked with other people about, but a lot of times you have those conversations with them and either they act like maybe they're not listening to you or they just kind of roll their eyes. But the important thing, right, is that you talk to them about it because they're hearing it and that has some impact on their behavior.
And at the end of the day, they're going to talk to someone. When I was a teenager, we talked to each other. But I also talked to my mom and I talked to my dad because they gave me an environment that made me know that it was safe and I could talk to them. There were some things that my mom said, you know, you can't talk to me about everything. These things you might not want to talk to me about, but you can talk to your dad about them.
Right.
She was honest with me about that, you know.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. And so I knew that I could go to them and that it was okay. And we have to make that apparent. You know, your children aren't going to just come to you just because necessarily. You have to let them know that it's okay and that you want to do that. And you can't always wait for them to come to you. You have to go to them.
Right. And Jeff, the one thing you said when we started this out was, this is the worst you've ever seen it. Tell me why you say it's the worst.
Well, the young people, the age of the young people getting involved in, and we've touched briefly on marijuana, but I've interviewed enough young people, hundreds of young people in my career, either result of arrest or just a intervention type scenario. And most of them start out with cigarettes, alcohol, and then graduate to marijuana. And I personally believe it's the gateway drug. Oftentimes they'll start with marijuana and they'll graduate to something else because their friend, as we always say, their friend said, the marijuana is no kick at all, and that's not try this drug. And it just amazes me, as Don and Teresa mentioned, the young age of people engaged in smoking marijuana and now abusing the prescription medications. It's frightening to me. I'm a grandfather of 4 and raised 3 adult children thanks to my wife. And quite frankly, it terrifies me. It absolutely terrifies me. I'm that concerned about it.
Are there also sometimes clues that you can find as a parent on Facebook, or if your kids have Twitter? Because I mean, that's a whole other element now that parents have to deal with. It's not just talking to your kids. They're talking to all kinds of people on Facebook. And you know, I know that some parents maybe are reluctant to, snoop on their kids if they're online, but don't you have to do that now?
You have to play detectives. In my household with my 2 boys, I would do a room search anytime I wanted to. And I want to get some chuckles out of that because, again, the parents, it's just a matter of having a relationship with them that you shouldn't have to do that, but if you have to, mom and dad do it, quite frankly. And you're doing it because for one reason. What's that reason? Because you love them. And it may sound corny, but I looked my boys and my 2 boys and my daughter in the eyes all the time and said, I'm being a dad because I love you, for no other reason, just because I love you and I care. I care about your future. That's all there is to it. It's that simple.
And with the cases that you've dealt with, oftentimes the parents really are not aware of this, right?
That is correct. Oftentimes the parents aren't aware of it.
And so that just means trying to open those lines of communication.
Correct. I don't have all the answers to that, but again, depending upon the age of the child, you sit down and talk to the parents and try to get them to open up with each other and talk about it. Again, talking about it, just as you leave here tonight and go home and talk about it with your child. Just to share the information and say, what do you know about that? That's how I address my boys. I said, what do you know about this drug? What do you know about this? And the good situations at the good family meals or the good times in the house. You just ask them, what do you know about marijuana? What do you know about alcohol? What do you know about ecstasy, cocaine, heroin? Keep asking questions.
Right. And Aaron, your advice to parents would be, I mean, what would have changed your situation? I'm sure you look back at that. Is there anything that really would have changed what you went through?
That's a question I ask myself a lot. And kind of to go backwards, I totally agree with what you're saying, because my parents let me know that it was a safe place, because my mom was, I love you and I'll do anything for you and you can come to me, I had that person to go to when I wanted to get sober. So it's not only, could she have stopped me from doing it? I don't know. I mean, it happened, so maybe not. But she was there for me when I needed her, and I knew that I wasn't going to get yelled at, or I couldn't have been punished. I was 20, but
But if you hadn't had her and that trust, you might not have reached out to her, and you might have continued on that path.
Right. Yeah. So that's one aspect I think about. So I was really happy to hear you say that. But it's tricky, because if you look at how, the American Medical Association or how some of these organizations view addiction, then technically, if I'm an alcoholic or a drug addict, then my body has a different way of dealing with chemicals than other people, and I'm more prone to push it off the edge, go a little too far. So what do we do? So I don't know what they could have done differently. I know from my experience, if and when I have children, what I would probably do is, again, a theme that I've heard a few times, throughout this panel is I would talk to my children. I would ask them, hey, what do you think about this drug? Like, what do you know about this? Like, I understand that you want to feel good. I understand that that you have a desire to kind of escape or be cool or, fit in or, just feel good. That's normal. Who doesn't want to feel good? But then I would follow it up with the realistic, the truth behind it, which is there are consequences. This is what comes along with it. Yeah, you're going to feel good for an hour or 2 hours, but then what? And kind of pull back and let them know that we can have this conversation and that I will empathize with their desire to feel good, but that I do know what I'm talking about, And I think that's important for parents to do, is just try to figure out how to have that conversation and not, I know parents want to be like the authority. I know. But it's like, your children are adults. It doesn't seem like it all the time, but they are, even at 12 now. They know so much, and there's so much information at everybody's fingertips, and you have to kind of address it like that.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Right. And Don, what would you say, the people that you have worked with through the years, is there anything that they have told you that would have maybe made a difference, or what the turning point would have been when they reflect back on their addictions and how it started?
Yeah. I think that for the most part, the adolescents that we deal with, when they talk about if anything was different, it would have been the reverse of what we're talking about. They would have been able to talk to somebody. They would have been able to say they feel inadequate. They would have said they can't do as good in school as other people. They wanted to play sports, it couldn't add up. And every time, one of them, when they took the drug, they took care of that stuff. And then when they took the drug, it worked so well, why even look at any of those concerns? I'll just take another drug, because I'm medicated, and when I'm medicated, I'm good. Mm-hmm. And then mom starts talking about drugs, and I realize that, some people think denial is a bad thing, that you're hiding or lying. Denial is self-protection, because if I fess up to what I'm doing, I gotta quit. And then by the time I get to heroin, my brain has been wired and rewired, and my brain says to me, you cannot live without me, heroin. So you're telling me don't drink, go to meetings, don't take drugs, and do all these things, and that's fine, but my brain tells me you can't live without me. And we cannot understand about these unmotivated people that aren't getting sober, 90% relapse rate. And I think that the horror, I grew up in the Vietnam War. That's really old, isn't it? And 58,000 people died during the Vietnam War. And you know what? That didn't impact me a bit. But at age 13, when my neighbor came home in a box, it impacted me. I understood what was coming out of that war. And over 58,000 people in this country have died of heroin. Do you know that? And opiates. More people in the Vietnam War we have already lost, many more. But you know what? I didn't really understand that until February 21st, 2011, because I got a phone call. And they said on the phone, Don, get to Mark's house. There's a problem and his wife and children need you. Mark's an heroin addict. I know it. I've dealt with it before. I'll go deal with it. What I didn't expect when I got to Mark's house was to find him in bed, dead. And I didn't expect 9 months later, in November, to find out that my friend Mike, his parents went down in the basement and they found him on the couch, dead. And in December, I did not expect to find out that Mike's girlfriend, who just died in November, died in December. So at the age of 13, I understood the impact of war. At the age of 57, in 2011, I found out the impact of opiates and heroin. And what I found is that, well, here's one question I want to ask. How many people here know somebody that's died of heroin or opiates? Wow.
There you go. Wow.
Wow. You know what I want to do? I want to light a candle. That's actually, I had this here. And this is going to be a memory of those people that you know. And if somebody's really grieving still and feels real bad, you know, the father in the play said, I don't know how you can understand how I feel. You know what? He can't. That kid can't. And nobody can understand how you feel when a young person, life is gone with no warning at all, and you never dream. And you know, people say, our parents of our kids say, oh, he's using the heroin again to roll their eyes. Using heroin, don't roll your eyes, because every single time that you use heroin or any opiate, you can die. We had a 14-year-old girl in from another community suburb at our agency, New Directions, and she said that every single time she took heroin, she said a prayer that she lived through it. Her brain convinced her she couldn't live without it, and she didn't know if she would be able to live with it. And I think that those of you, how many people here don't know anyone that's died of heroin or opiates? A lot less, but I will tell you this, and it's sad news, you will. Because dying of opiates is kind of like dying of a heart attack anymore. It's a high risk, it's sad, it's painful, and you know, I think this session here tonight is not about hope. It's about raising awareness. The hope comes when people get treatment, when they get help. Tonight it's about alarm. You know, it's a really serious problem. It's in the burbs. And people, there's not a school in this community that doesn't know people that either died while they're in their school or shortly after. So it's really, really high risk and painful.
And the heroin is that accessible in our communities
The
too.
heroin is that accessible. I can get on the phone right now, so I'll meet you at the spot, get over there in 10 minutes, and it'll be there. He'll throw the heroin in my window, I'll throw the cash out, I'm gone. He runs down the alley where he came from, and no one's to know the difference.
And I think that's what's so alarming is oftentimes too, when you do live in the suburbs, maybe you do think that these things don't happen here. But obviously, they do. And you're all seeing it every day. And the fact that you're seeing it at such a young age is shocking.
And you will not experience greater horror than a parent that loses a child to drug addiction.
Right. And I
The
know,
only thing I want to say to a parent, you can never take responsibility for it. That's another thing. We're saying what parents should do. Parents don't make addicts. When we use drugs, we become an addict. It's real important for parents to know that. The other thing that we find with parents is the first thing we do when we bring a child into the facility, we get the parents involved in a parent empowerment group. Because I'll tell you what, the parents are pretty disempowered by the time the kid gets to us. We had a parent who virtually let their kids steal everything in their house rather than call the police until there was nothing else left to steal. So you could buy heroin. And then he went to the grandmother's house and started stealing. The parents need to be empowered. So when I tell a parent, you should do this or you should do that, if you could, you probably would, but you can't. So we got to start there.
no one wants this to happen to their child, obviously.
Exactly. And the horror.
Yeah.
A little boy who I really know is going to end up, incarcerated. Can't even comprehend it. And then you find out they're dead. Or somebody else died from the stuff they got.
Right,
There's so much harm.
right, right. And Sharice, the parents that you talk to, through your work, I'm sure that they feel the same way. They feel very helpless in all this, and they want the best for their kids.
Yes, they do. We all do. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and it's really true. And you step up whenever you see a child who's in trouble. But just like everyone on the panel has already said, this night really is about awareness and raising awareness. Locally, in the state of Ohio, prescription drug-related deaths have surpassed motor vehicle accidents as the #1 cause of accidental deaths. It's that serious. And you can't say it doesn't impact me. It's not in my neighborhood, it's not in my community. It's in all of our neighborhoods, it's in all of our communities. And the worst thing that you could do as a parent or an adult who has access to any child in any level is to think that this doesn't touch you in some way.
Jeff, when did it start that heroin seemed to make a resurgence? Because it seems like over the years, we were so concerned about cocaine for a long time. Obviously, still concerned about those things, or crack, but now we've heard so much more about heroin. Was there a time when there was really a resurgence of heroin?
Yes, it's been a couple of years now, and we directly related, law enforcement directly relates it to the abuse of the pharmaceuticals. They're opiate-based medications. Again, once an individual gets cut off by a doctor or they can't obtain it any longer, heroin is much cheaper. And it's a very similar fix, is the street term for it. And they seek the heroin and ingest the heroin to take place of the medications.
I also want to mention, too, that this Thursday, Channel 3 is going to be doing a half-hour show, actually an hour show, starting at 7, about the whole issue of heroin abuse in our community and what's being done and how significant the problem is. So that's going to be this Thursday at 7 o'clock. The next part of our program is going to be, I know that a lot of you have some questions yourselves, and so they're collecting the cards right now, and so we'll address some of the questions that you have as well. I know we have a lot of young people in the audience tonight too, and if you have anything that you really feel like you want to talk about as well, please feel free. The first question is, what if you don't like the group your child is hanging out with? What's the conversation if that's what you're dealing with? Charisse? I know you really want me to call on you, right? Or anybody else.
You know what? And this is not necessarily a popular opinion, but it's something that I have noticed with the parents that I've dealt with the my staff, and when they go out to the school, they come back and they talk to me about how difficult it is to work with the adolescents that we have in treatment because their parents are permissive of their behaviors. When they come to them and say, look, these are the guidelines, and you have to abide by this. Are you going to do this? If you can't, we're not going to be able to move forward. We've had situations where the parents have turned to the young person and said, well, what do you think? Can you do this? And so, for me, we have to stop being friends and only friends. My mom would always tell me, I'm your mother, not your friend. You have friends, you need a mom. And so we have to take the hard line. I mean, if you don't set some type of boundary, which I know I didn't necessarily want as a child, but I need it. If you don't set some type of limit, you don't set some type of boundary, you're not doing your child any favors, because when they get out there into the real world, there are limits, there are boundaries, and you break the laws, you have to suffer the consequences. And so that's something that we can teach them while we have them, in our midst to be able to do.
I think I agree with Charisse. I think two things. One time when I called a parent, this was many years ago, and I said that your child just came in and they said they have an alcohol and drug problem. And the mother says, well, I can't break away right now. Like it was like no biggie. And I was like in shock. But unfortunately, that's not shocking anymore. The other thing that I know is that oftentimes when we have an adolescent who's really, their life is seriously impacted with pot, marijuana, we have to debate more with the parent and the child over the problem of marijuana. The parents, we've had parents with smoking marijuana with their kids, and they don't even understand what we're talking about, and they start throwing all the literature and all the web pages, and we expect it from the kids. But this is much of why we're talking about parents need empowerment, need education, need to learn about boundaries, and their own use. Because a lot of times these children come, if you're in a family where the parents are an alcoholic or drug addict, you're sitting ducks to become the same yourself. Because to you, that's normal. That's how you respond to things.
Okay, we have more questions that have come in. I'll try to get to as many of these as we can. Can you talk about K2 Spice? It's a new drug that a lot of kids are exposed to.
Yes, there was recent legislation outlawing K2 Spice. It's a chemical formula, much beyond my comprehension, unless you're a doctorate in chemistry. The legislation passed to make it illegal in the state of Ohio, but unfortunately the manufacturers are always one step ahead of law enforcement. They change the chemical compound, chemical structure of the spice, of the K2, synthetics, what it's called a synthetic drug. And some of them are not illegal. So we are pursuing that. In addition to the heroin, we pursue 24/7. We are pursuing the K2 spice. Again, that's become a problem. Yes, it's a problem in the 6 western suburbs. It's a concern more than a problem, I should say. But it's illegal right now in the state of Ohio, but unfortunately some of the compounds, they're changing the name brands and the chemical compound of it on a daily basis. So we in law enforcement, it's a tough job for us, but we along with the legislature have to continue to keep up with that and outlaw specific chemical compounds that make up the K2 spice.
Jeff, can you tell people where kids get spice?
Yes, at what we refer to as the head shops.
Is that the same thing as bath salts? Or that's different?
Different, bath salts are different, and that too is illegal in the state of Ohio. In fact, same concept, synthetic. It's not Calgon, ladies and gentlemen, it's bath salts. It's a chemical compound. Very dangerous. You can chew it, you can smoke it, you can, I said smoke it, but inhale it in a number of ways. And again, it's just more work for law enforcement. It's an additional issue for us, and we're pursuing it.
We've also had kids come in on spice and K2, and you wouldn't want to be where they're at because it's not pretty. There's a lot of reactions, a lot of emotion, a lot of confusion, a lot of I don't know what's going on, a lot of anger, a lot of flipping out, and wanting more. And that's what it does to you.
Right. The next question, how do you balance letting the person hit bottom versus stepping in to help?
I believe that you can raise somebody's bottom. I think it's a responsibility to raise your bottom. If we make it hurt while they're up here, they don't have to go down here, they don't have to go to jail, they don't have to go to the grave. A lot of times we say, when they hit their bottom, they'll do something about it. And that's true, but hopefully, once again, we raise their problem. You know, if they're a student, I hold consequences. They come in late, I'm not going to cover for them. If I'm a parent, I said 10 o'clock and 10:15, hey, especially, you know. So virtually any behaviors that are going to enable their behavior, if I challenge that, I could bring up also send them for an assessment and find out what's going on with them, and that could raise their bottom as they start getting treatment, or if they don't, they're going to have these consequences. But either, if we wait for somebody to have their bottom, it may not be pretty for anybody. So I don't believe we really want to do that. They want to raise their bottom.
What do you do as a parent if your child is stealing from you? And I know we've talked about that is very common.
You know, a lot of people have misconception of law enforcement. If you as a parent come to Jeff Capel at the West Shore Enforcement Bureau, or any of us at the West Shore Enforcement Bureau, and talk to us about your child, we're not just going to cuff them and stuff them, what we call it. We're not just going to put your child in jail or arrest them. If you come to me as a parent, I'm a parent. You come to me and say, Jeff, in confidential, complete confidentiality, you come to me and say, I think I have a problem at home. I'm missing items at home. Report it to the police. You can report it to me, and we'll sit down and talk about it. We'll get your child in. We'll get the people up here on the stage involved in it, and we'll do what we can for you. It's just not a matter of arresting them. So if you think there's a problem at home, if mom and dad thinks there's a problem, there probably is a problem, plain and simple. And I would welcome you. I will stay as late as you want me to tonight. I want to say I have business cards, and if you want to talk to me privately at some other point in time, you're welcome to do so. I'm a public servant. That's what I'm here for. And if we can help you with your child, we can save one life. It's a good day, a real good day.
What's the most common drug that's being used by people under 18 now, would you say?
Prescription medications
Right.
and marijuana. We still see a lot of marijuana. And I'm sorry, Don, to step in your place.
Go for it, dude.
We both see it. We still see a lot of marijuana being smoked, and that's another subject for another night, the legalization of marijuana. So.
The thing that we're seeing at New Directions, kids coming in are number 1, marijuana, number 2, alcohol, number 3, opiates. So it's pretty much just.
What about, somebody was asking whether Ritalin or other psychotropic prescribed drugs are considered gateway drugs. And I know in the play that we just saw, obviously Adderall was being abused, but is that something you often see then that leads to stronger drugs?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Sometimes which comes first, you know. Somebody has the opportunity to hold it. If you're on Adderall as prescribed, it shouldn't be taken anywhere because it's not going to give you any adverse effects. But if you're getting somebody else's Adderall and all of a sudden it's become a stimulant instead of helping you stay calm, then you're set up for whatever, you know. And that may happen Usually somebody that'll get into that will go on to more serious things for sure. Definitely gateway.
This is a question that I have as we were talking about this. How often do you see young people who really are achieving a lot in school? They get good grades, they do well in sports, they're juggling a lot of things, and it's the stress of trying to maintain all of that that may lead to this. Is that something that you often hear kids talking about, that it's the pressure and the stress?
There's another issue, but yeah, you go to any football team, they're using drugs, a lot of them. And it's, after the game, I'm going to chill out, I'm going to relax. It's almost like, why does somebody use drugs? It might be because everyone else is. I really believe a big piece is self-medication. This world doesn't talk like we used to. I'll text, I'm not going to share feelings. No one really knows me, They don't know what I'm up against. I'm not sharing it. And I really believe that most people that are abusing drugs and getting started with it and become satisfied with it real quick are people that need medication of some sort, either psychological or drugs. And no, they're not talking to anybody, nobody's talking to them.
I think we're going to close this up, so maybe if just as we close the program, we just talk just briefly what you hope people take away with them tonight as they're driving home from this program. What do you hope they remember, Jeff?
Just the seriousness of it, it's epidemic levels, and again, just share it with everyone that you run into. Make it a topic of conversation, quite frankly. And if we can be of any assistance to you, the West Shore Enforcement Bureau, I mean that very sincerely. Don't hesitate to call. And again, I'll stay afterwards and have business cards, and we're here to help you. And again, it's all about family, it's about love, it's about family, it's about taking care of our children, plain and simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron?
Kind of echoing the first thing I said was, there is no stereotype. And if you're saying to yourself, it can't happen to me or it can't happen to my family, there's a serious issue there. And especially, looking at the whole community, everyone who I know who has died from a drug overdose, which is unfortunately, a decent amount of people, they were all people from the suburbs. All, good kids. Like people, I grew up with, or people that I knew, and, even some of them shocked me. Knowing what I know, I was still like, wow, I can't believe that girl died from a drug overdose. Just shocked. So, I think it's important to just kind of keep things in perspective. And, it's not to scare you, it's to essentially empower you. It's to say, you know what, I understand that this is happening in my community, and I understand, what we're up against, and I'm going to do my part to make it better.
Right.
So.
Thank you. All right.
As Jeff said, we're all willing to stay after, and I also agree, if you ever have a problem, go to Jeff, and you'll find out law enforcement really care about these people. But I think what I would like you to think about, a friend of mine, his son was using heroin, two sons actually. He already had 2 daughters die, one from a drug overdose, one from a car accident. And I said to him, every time your sons use, they could die. And he was flabbergasted, shocked, and horrified. But what I'm going to ask you to do when you leave here, if you know anybody that's using heroin or opiates, please tell them, at least you'll have told them, that the next time they use, they could die. And if you know somebody whose loved one is using opiates or heroin, prescribed opiates, heroin, please inform them that the next time that loved one uses, they could die. Because at least you've told them. And if you haven't told them, you're not going to feel too good about it. And if you have told them, it might be an opportunity for them to raise the bottom. And I'll tell you, it's not easy to raise the bottom on somebody that's using heroin, because you won't find a more sophisticated manipulator. And it's not because they're bad people, it's because they have to protect their supply, and their brain's saying, I can't live without it. So I'm going to take you for a ride. So it's real hard work. And if there's anybody here that's still really grieving about somebody that's died from heroin, and if you think this candle might help you at all, come up and take it at the end, okay?
just like Erin, I think I want to end right where I began. Children watch what we do, and it's far more important and impactful to them than what we say. And so the question that I want to leave you with is, what's in your purse? Not literally, but, you know, what behaviors are you modeling? And are there any behaviors that you're modeling that you could stand to change? Who's watching you? And are you always proud of what it is that they're seeing?
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Obviously, the fact that you're here shows that you care a lot about this subject, and that's how we start to change this issue in our communities. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Karina.
First of all, I'm going to thank all of you because this was profound tonight. It was a powerful message for all of us to hear, and you each brought something so different to this conversation and so valuable. So thank you to all of you.
Susan, can I say one thing?
Sure.
I would like to say that Kim Wheeler is a superstar. We should give her a big hand.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks. I'll pull you later.
Don Davey, this has been a learning process for me. One of the things that I just learned from Don was that 75% of adults in recovery started when they were teenagers. So this is really an adolescent crisis, an adolescent disease. And now is the time that we can impact their future. The other thing I learned when I was going through this process of planning this program was that the language we use changes the conversation entirely. So when I asked my kids if they knew anybody involved in prescription drug abuse, they laughed at me, they rolled their eyes. When I asked them about opiates or stimulants, they rolled their eyes. When I asked them about Adderall, they said everybody does it. So if we're choosing our language well, we're going to have a very different conversation, and we have to bring it down to the level of what they're talking about. And even adults, when you talk about prescription drug abuse, I really knew that wasn't anything I needed to worry about. But I do know Adderall is being shared right and left with kids, and that's a conversation that we have to have with our children. And that takes me to the last point, which is this is all of our problems. Because if our neighbor and our kids' friends have these drugs and are sharing them, they end up in our sphere. And so what I hope is that everybody here tonight will leave and tell somebody what they heard. And if somebody's interested, we have a program next Monday night on the East Side. It's in your program. And please let people know. I think I'm changed for all of this conversation, and I know that I will be better at talking to my children about it. So thank you all for coming. I do have the Kindle raffle. And the person who wins the Kindle raffle, the Kindle Fire tonight is Brandy Berry. Are you here? Oh.
All right. Good, Randy.
Thank you all for coming. I think there were sheets handed out if you wanted to fill out so that we can get feedback from tonight's evening. But thank you, and thank you to all of you again.